The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Emily Ross didn't notice. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, watching patterns dance across displays that most people would dismiss as random noise. The Arcturus Communications Array had been her second home for 3 years now, ever since the government decided that listening to space was worth the massive investment in quantum receivers and signal processors. Tonight felt different. The usual cosmic background radiation carried something new, something that made her heart race with possibilities she barely dared to consider. The signal pulsed with mathematical precision, arriving every 4.7 seconds with variations that suggested structure rather than natural phenomena. Emily had seen countless false alarms, meteor impacts, and stellar interference that briefly mimicked intelligence, but this was unlike anything in her database. She called David Kim first. The cryptographer arrived within 20 minutes, his hair still messy from sleep, but his mind sharp as ever. Behind him came Professor Alan Torres, the facility's senior astrophysicist who had taught Emily everything she knew about reading the universe's hidden messages. The three of them formed an unlikely team, bound together by curiosity and the shared belief that humanity wasn't alone. "Show me what you've got," David said, settling into his workstation with practiced efficiency. Emily transferred the data, stream, to the main display. The signal appeared as cascading waves of information, dense with embedded patterns that hurt to look at directly. It started about 6 hours ago. Look at these mathematical progressions. This isn't random stellar noise or equipment malfunction. Something intelligent created this. Alan adjusted his glasses and studied the frequency analysis. The power source would have to be enormous to reach us at this strength. We're talking about a civilization with energy output that makes our entire global grid look like a flashlight. David's fingers flew across his keyboard, running the signal through every decryption algorithm in their system. The structure is incredibly complex. Multiple layers of encoding with what looks like error correction built into the transmission itself. Whoever sent this really wanted it to get through intact. Hours passed as they worked in focused silence. Emily cross-referenced the signal's origin point with known star catalogs, while David battled with encryption patterns that seemed to follow logical rules but used completely unknown mathematical foundations. Alan monitored the signal strength and confirmed their worst fear. The transmission was getting stronger, which meant either the source was moving closer or increasing its power output. The breakthrough came at dawn. David's quantum processors finally found a mathematical key that unlocked the first layer of encryption. The data that emerged made Emily's blood run cold. Star charts appeared on their screens, showing stellar positions and gravitational patterns with precision that exceeded Earth's best astronomical surveys. But these weren't exploration maps or scientific observations. "These are tactical charts," Alan whispered, his voice tight with growing alarm. "Look at these markers. Defensive positions, patrol routes, supply lines. This is military intelligence." Emily's translation programs began parsing linguistic structures embedded within the tactical data. The language was unlike anything in human experience, but certain concepts emerged through context and repetition. The senders called themselves the Helix, and they were running from something called the Dominion. More data flowed across their screens as David's systems cracked deeper, encryption layers. The Helix weren't exploring or conquering, they were fleeing. The message contained urgent warnings about Dominion fleet movements, safe passage routes through dangerous space, and desperate pleas for any surviving Helix colonies to maintain. Radio silence until extraction could be arranged. "This isn't a first contact message," Emily realized with growing horror. "It's a distress call. They're looking for their own people, sharing intelligence about some kind of galactic war." David pulled up the signal's trajectory analysis. According to the directional data, this transmission was aimed at a star system about 40 light-years from here. The Kepler survey flagged that system as potentially habitable decades ago, but we've never detected any signs of civilization. Alan's face went pale as he ran calculations on his tablet. If their target system is dead or abandoned and we're receiving this signal because of orbital mechanics and gravitational lensing, then we've accidentally intercepted military communications between allies in an active war zone. The implications hit them like a physical blow. Somewhere in the galaxy, an ancient civilization was fighting for survival against an aggressive empire. The Helix had sent critical intelligence to what they believed was a colony of their own people, but instead, their desperate message had reached a small blue planet whose inhabitants had just learned they weren't alone in the universe. Emily stared at the continuing data stream, watching tactical updates and fleet positions scroll past in alien script. We need to contact the Global Defense Initiative immediately. If the Helix are running from this dominion and they're using our local space as a communication route, she didn't need to finish the thought. David was already pulling up long-range sensor data from Earth's orbital platforms. The readings were subtle but unmistakable. Massive energy signatures moving through nearby star systems, following trajectories that matched the Dominion patrol routes described in the Helix transmission. "How long do we have?" Alan asked quietly. David's calculations appeared on the main screen. Based on the fleet movement data in these messages, and assuming they're following the same communication vectors that led them to intercept Helix signals, maybe 6 months, maybe less. Emily saved every piece of data they had collected, her mind already racing with possibilities. Humanity had accidentally become privy to the strategic intelligence of an interstellar war. They knew about Dominion, tactics, fleet strengths, and military objectives. They understood Helix technology and communication protocols. The question was what to do with this knowledge. Outside the facility, the sun rose over a world that didn't know it was about to face its greatest challenge. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, 2 alien civilizations were locked in a conflict that would soon reach Earth's doorstep. But for the first time in human history, they wouldn't be facing the unknown completely blind. The signal from the Helix continued to pulse through space, carrying its burden of hope and desperation to a species that was about to make a choice that would define their place in the galaxy forever. Director Rebecca Hayes had seen many impossible situations during her 20-year career with the Global Defense Initiative, but nothing had prepared her for this morning's briefing. She sat in the underground conference room 300 feet beneath Geneva, surrounded by the world's foremost experts in linguistics, military strategy, and xenobiology, all of whom looked as stunned as she felt. The Arcturus team's discovery had sent shockwaves through every government on Earth. Within 72 hours of Emily Ross's initial report, the planet's most classified facilities were working around the clock to understand the implications of the Helix transmission. The message that had seemed like humanity's first glimpse of alien intelligence had become something far more complex and dangerous. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Rebecca said, reviewing the files spread across the table. "We've intercepted military communications between allies in an interstellar war. The losing side thinks we're one of their colonies, and the winning side is heading directly toward Earth following the same communication routes." Tom Bradley, the linguist who had spent the last week immersed in Helix language patterns, nodded grimly. "The linguistic analysis confirms it. The original transmission contains cultural references and shared historical markers that indicate the senders expected their message to reach people who would understand these references immediately. They're not trying to establish first contact. They're talking to family." Engineer Lisa Wright pulled up holographic displays showing the technical specifications they had extracted from the Helix data. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours in some areas, but surprisingly similar in others. It's almost like they followed a parallel development path but had more time to refine their designs. If we're careful about how we present our capabilities, we might be able to convince them that we're an isolated colony that developed differently. Colonel Jack Morgan, the facility's senior military strategist, studied the Dominion tactical data with professional interest. "This is the most complete intelligence package on an enemy force that I've ever seen. Fleet compositions, weapon capabilities, standard attack patterns, supply line vulnerabilities. If this information is accurate, we know more about Dominion military doctrine than most of their own soldiers." Rebecca made the decision that would change human history. "We're going to respond to the Helix transmission. But we're not going to reveal that we're human. As far as they'll know, we're exactly what they think we are, a lost Helix colony that's been surviving in isolation." The room erupted in worried voices, but Rebecca held up her hand for silence. "I've spoken with the Security Council. Every major government agrees that this is our best option. If we reveal our true nature, we become an unknown factor in their war. The Dominion might see us as a threat to be eliminated, or the Helix might decide we're too primitive to trust with their intelligence. But if we're a Helix colony, we're automatically allies with access to their support and protection." Tom Bradley opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. "I can create a response using their linguistic patterns and cultural markers. We'll need to invent a history for our supposed colony, explain why we've been out of contact, and justify any technological differences they might notice." Lisa Wright was already sketching modifications to Earth's communication arrays. "I can build transmitters that mimic their technology signatures. The engineering principles they use are advanced, but not incomprehensible. With some creative modifications to our quantum transmitters, we can make our signals look like they're coming from Helix equipment." Over the following weeks, the deception took shape with meticulous attention to detail. Tom Bradley crafted a response that positioned Earth as Colony Designation Terra 7, a Helix settlement that had lost contact with the main civilization during a Dominion attack decades earlier. The story explained that Terra 7 had survived by developing new defensive technologies and maintaining strict communication silence. Emily Ross worked with Tom to embed false historical records within their response. They created fictional, archaeological evidence of ancient Helix settlements on Earth, manufactured cultural artifacts that would support their cover story, and developed explanations for why human technology had evolved along different lines than standard Helix designs. The most challenging aspect was presenting Earth's actual military capabilities as Helix innovations. Lisa Wright's team reverse-engineered human weapons systems to make them appear based on Helix technological principles. Nuclear missiles became quantum disruption devices, radar systems became gravitational sensor arrays, and satellite networks became orbital defense matrices. Colonel Morgan contributed strategic analyses that were purely human in origin, but presented as tactical innovations developed during Terra 7's isolation. He described combined arms tactics, asymmetric warfare principles, and adaptive defense strategies as if they were evolutionary improvements to traditional Helix military doctrine. When their response was finally ready, it painted a picture of a lost Helix colony that had not only survived against impossible odds, but had thrived and innovated. Terra 7 claimed to have developed advanced defensive systems, new strategic paradigms, and a deep understanding of Dominion tactics gained through decades of avoiding detection. The transmission was sent through modified equipment that perfectly mimicked Helix technology signatures. The message traveled across the galaxy, carrying humanity's greatest deception: the claim that Earth was not a world of primitive aliens, but a forgotten outpost of Helix civilization ready to rejoin the fight against their common enemy. 3. Response came faster than anyone had expected. Within days, Helix command frequencies came alive with excited chatter about the rediscovered colony. Fleet Admiral Tan himself transmitted personally to Terra 7, expressing amazement at their survival and requesting detailed information about their new defensive technologies. What followed was a flood of intelligence data that made the original intercepted message look like a brief note. The Helix command structure, believing they had found not just a lost colony but one that had developed revolutionary military innovations, began sharing their complete strategic picture with Earth. Rebecca Hayes read the incoming transmissions, with a mixture of pride and terror. The deception had worked perfectly. Too perfectly. The Helix weren't just welcoming Terra 7 back into their civilization. They were promoting the supposed colony to a position of strategic importance within their military hierarchy. Humanity had achieved the impossible. They had inserted themselves into an interstellar war not as primitive natives begging for protection, but as innovative allies whose tactical insights might determine the outcome of a galactic conflict. The only problem was that they now had to live up to the expectations they had created. As more Helix transmissions arrived requesting tactical support and strategic coordination, Rebecca realized that her decision had committed humanity to becoming the military leaders of an alien resistance movement. They had wanted to survive first contact with galactic civilization. Instead, they had accidentally become its generals. Colonel Jack Morgan never imagined that his military career would lead to commanding alien fleets from a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. The secure communication chamber had become his second home over the past month, its walls lined with displays, showing star charts that covered regions of space humanity had never dreamed of reaching. Each morning brought new transmission from Helix commanders who believed they were talking to Strategic Prime Ter, the brilliant military mind leading Terra 7's defense forces. The promotion had happened almost by accident. Admiral Tan's first request for tactical analysis had been routine, an assessment of Dominion patrol patterns near a contested star system. Morgan had provided a straightforward military evaluation based on the intelligence patterns he observed, suggesting alternative approach vectors that would minimize contact with enemy forces. The Helix command structure had been so impressed with his insights that they immediately elevated Terra 7's status within their military hierarchy. Now, 3 weeks later, Morgan found himself coordinating strategy for 17 different Helix battle groups scattered across a front that spanned dozens of star systems. Each decision he made affected the lives of millions of alien soldiers and refugees, and the weight of that responsibility was becoming overwhelming. Dr. Emily Ross worked beside him, frantically translating increasingly complex military terminology and cultural references that arrived with each new transmission. The Helix commanders expected their lost colony to understand references to historical battles, tactical doctrines, and shared military traditions that humanity knew nothing about. Every response required careful research and creative interpretation to maintain their deception. "They want our analysis of the Sigma Draconis situation," Emily said, highlighting sections of the latest message from Admiral Tan. "They're referencing something called the Meridian Gambit and asking if we think it would work against Dominion fortress positions." Morgan studied the tactical data, while Emily searched through their database of intercepted Helix communications for any mention of this mysterious strategy. Based on the context, it sounds like some kind of coordinated assault pattern, maybe something involving simultaneous attacks from multiple vectors. David Kim looked up from his workstation where he was monitoring Dominion communication intercepts. "I'm seeing increased chatter on their military frequencies. Something big is happening in the outer systems. Fleet movements, supply convoys, massive energy signatures that our sensors can barely detect." The scope of the conflict was staggering. Morgan had commanded battalion-level operations during his career. But the Helix Dominion War involved fleets of thousands of ships, battles that raged across multiple star systems simultaneously, and strategic considerations that spanned centuries of galactic history. Every day brought reports of worlds lost or liberated, refugee populations numbering in the millions, and technological capabilities that made Earth's military look like children playing with toy soldiers. The deception nearly collapsed when Helix reconnaissance scouts reported unusual energy signatures around Earth's solar system. The readings didn't match any known Helix technology profiles, and several alien commanders began asking pointed questions about Terra 7's supposed defensive installations. David Kim saved the mission with rapid thinking and creative storytelling. Working with Lisa Wright, he fabricated detailed technical specifications for experimental defensive arrays that Terra 7 had supposedly developed during their isolation. The explanation claimed that centuries of hiding from Dominion forces had required innovative approaches to stealth and defense, leading to hybrid technologies that combined traditional Helix principles with revolutionary new concepts. "We call them adaptive defense networks," Morgan told Admiral Tan during their next communication session. "The basic idea is that static defenses are too vulnerable to Dominion siege tactics, so we developed systems that can reconfigure themselves in real time based on incoming threats." The Helix fleet commander was fascinated by this supposed innovation. Within days, other Helix battle groups were requesting technical specifications for Terra 7's adaptive systems, hoping to upgrade their own defensive capabilities. Morgan found himself describing purely theoretical technologies as if they were operational systems that had been tested in combat for decades. Meanwhile, long-range sensors continued to detect the approaching Dominion threat. The enemy fleet was massive, thousands of ships arranged in formations that suggested overwhelming firepower and tactical sophistication. Analysis of their movement patterns revealed a force that had conquered countless worlds using strategies refined over centuries of galactic warfare. The intelligence data provided by the Helix painted a terrifying picture of Dominion capabilities. Their ships carried weapons that could crack planets from orbit. Their soldiers were enhanced with technology that made them nearly indestructible, and their strategic doctrines had never suffered a major defeat in recorded galactic history. Admiral Tan's latest transmission carried a desperate undertone that even the universal translators couldn't disguise. The Helix fleet he commanded was formidable by any reasonable standard, but analysis suggested they were still outgunned 3-1 by the approaching Dominion force. The alien commander was counting on Terra 7's strategic innovations to provide the edge they needed for survival. "Strategic Prime Tur," Tan's message read, "Our analysts have studied your tactical recommendations extensively. Your insights into adaptive defense and multi-vector assault patterns represent revolutionary thinking that could change the course of this war. We are implementing your suggestions across all battle groups and respectfully request your continued strategic guidance as we prepare for the final confrontation." Morgan stared at the message with a mixture of pride and terror. The Helix weren't just following his advice, they were restructuring their entire military approach based on human tactical thinking. Strategies developed through centuries of warfare on Earth were being adapted for interstellar combat, and the results were apparently impressive enough to give the ancient alien civilization hope for their first major victory against the Dominion. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity's gift for military innovation, honed through millennia of conflict and competition, had become their greatest asset in a galactic war they never asked to join. The same aggressive instincts and strategic thinking that had nearly destroyed their own world were now being used to save an alien civilization from extinction. Emily Ross finished translating the latest batch of tactical updates and turned to Morgan with concern in her eyes. "They're not just asking for advice anymore. Admiral Tan wants Terra 7 to take operational command of the entire defensive operation. They want you to coordinate the battle strategy for the final confrontation." Morgan looked at the star, charts showing the approaching Dominion fleet and the scattered Helix forces preparing to make their stand. In a few weeks, the fate of an entire galactic civilization would depend on tactical decisions made by a human colonel who had learned warfare on a single small planet. The Helix had placed their trust in Terra 7 based on strategic innovations that were purely human in origin. Now it was time to discover whether humanity's approach to warfare could succeed on an interstellar scale or whether their deception would lead an ancient alien race to their final defeat. Captain Neil Foster had never expected to command a spaceship, much less one disguised as an alien dreadnought in the middle of an interstellar war. The bridge of the newly christened HMS Defiance buzzed with activity as human technicians worked, alongside hastily installed Helix communication systems, creating a command center that looked alien enough to fool long-range sensors while remaining functional for human operators. The ship itself was humanity's greatest achievement in deception technology. Built in the orbital shipyards above Earth, in just 8 weeks, the Defiance combined human engineering with Helix design principles to create a vessel that could pass for an authentic alien warship. Every surface detail had been carefully crafted to match the technological signatures that Dominion forces would expect to encounter from a Helix colony ship. War Prime Drax observed the approaching battle from his command vessel, the Eternal, Dominion, with the confidence of a commander who had never known defeat. His fleet of 3,000 ships represented the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever assembled, equipped with weapons that had reduced hundreds of worlds to ash and commanded by officers who had perfected the art of conquest over centuries of warfare. What Drax expected to find was a desperate collection of Helix refugees making their final stand around some primitive colony world. What he encountered instead was a defensive formation unlike anything in Dominion tactical databases, arranged with mathematical precision that suggested strategic thinking far beyond normal Helix capabilities. The battle began in the outer reaches of Earth's solar system as Dominion advance scouts encountered the first layer of human-designed defenses. Foster's tactical modifications had transformed standard Helix patrol formations into something entirely new, units that moved with unpredictable patterns while maintaining perfect coordination, using gravitational mechanics in ways that turned planets and moons into strategic assets. Dominion scouts are reporting unusual tactical arrangements, Foster's communications officer reported. They're requesting reinforcements and updated battle analysis. Foster smiled grimly as he watched the enemy response on his tactical displays. Human military doctrine had always emphasized adaptation and improvisation over rigid adherence to established patterns. Where Helix forces traditionally followed proven formation structures, the human-modified units introduced controlled chaos that made their movements impossible to predict using standard tactical algorithms. Admiral Tan, commanding the main Helix fleet from his flagship, watched in amazement as Terra 7's forces demonstrated combat techniques that seemed to violate every principle of conventional space warfare. Ships used solar wind and magnetic fields for maneuvering, turned asteroid belts into defensive barriers, and coordinated attacks using timing patterns that resembled complex musical compositions more than military operations. The true innovation came from engineer Lisa Wright's modifications to the defensive satellite network orbiting Earth. What had begun as a last resort planetary defense system had evolved into something far more sophisticated. An interlocking web of energy relay stations that could redirect and amplify weapon fire from friendly ships while creating interference patterns that disrupted enemy targeting systems. War Prime Drax studied the tactical displays with growing frustration as his advance forces encountered resistance that made no sense according to established military doctrine. The defenders weren't following traditional Helix strategies, but they weren't random either. Every move seemed calculated to maximize psychological impact while achieving precise tactical objectives. Analysis indicates the enemy is using gravitational slingshot maneuvers around planetary bodies, his tactical officer reported. They're treating celestial mechanics as weapons systems, using orbital dynamics to achieve velocity and directional changes that our projections cannot anticipate. Drax had conquered 47 star systems using proven Dominion tactics that had never failed against any opponent. He commanded overwhelming firepower, superior numbers, and centuries of tactical refinement. But the forces defending this system seemed to anticipate his every move while responding with strategies that appeared to be improvised in real time. What the Dominion commander didn't understand was that he was fighting the accumulated military wisdom of an entire species that had spent its history perfecting warfare against itself. Human tactical thinking drew from thousands of years of conflict, incorporating lessons learned from ancient cavalry charges to modern fighter pilot maneuvers, all adapted for the three-dimensional battlefield of space combat. Captain Foster coordinated, with Helix squadron commanders using hand signals and tactical languages that had evolved from naval warfare traditions stretching back centuries. His human crew translated these concepts into alien tactical terminology, creating hybrid strategies that combined the best of both civilizations' military heritage. The turning point came when the satellite network activated its full potential. Wright's energy relay system allowed smaller Helix ships to channel the combined firepower of their entire fleet through human-designed focusing arrays. What should have been Earth's final defensive measure became a force multiplier that transformed individual vessels into weapons platforms capable of matching Dominion dreadnoughts. War Prime Drax watched in disbelief as his superior firepower was systematically neutralized by defensive innovations that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Ships that should have been destroyed by his opening bombardment instead absorbed the energy and redirected it back at his own forces with amplified intensity. "Sir, our weapon effectiveness has decreased by 60%, his weapons officer reported. "The enemy defensive network is creating interference patterns that are degrading our targeting systems and redirecting our energy weapons back at our own formations." Admiral Tan transmitted urgent congratulations to Strategic Prime, praising Terra 7's revolutionary defensive concepts. "Your adaptive systems are performing beyond our greatest expectations. Dominion forces are retreating from forward positions and requesting strategic reassessment. This is the first time in recorded history that a Dominion advance has been stopped by defensive action alone." Foster acknowledged the transmission while monitoring the main battle as it moved toward Earth's inner system. The initial success had been encouraging, but the real test was yet to come. War Prime Drax still commanded overwhelming numerical superiority, and Dominion tactical doctrine emphasized adaptability in the face of unexpected resistance. The human captain knew that their deception had bought them time and tactical advantage, but the final outcome would depend on whether humanity's gift for military innovation could overcome the raw power of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. As the Dominion fleet regrouped for its main assault, Foster prepared to discover whether human tactical thinking could succeed where traditional Helix strategies had failed. The battle for Earth was about to test not just human technology and alien alliances, but the fundamental question of whether innovation and adaptability could triumph over overwhelming force and established doctrine. In the darkness between worlds, two different approaches to warfare were preparing for a confrontation that would determine the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Emily Ross stood in the communication center watching displays that showed the final phase of humanity's greatest deception playing out across the solar system. The Dominion fleet had reorganized after their initial setbacks and was now deploying planet crackers, massive weapons designed to shatter worlds from orbit. War Prime Drax had decided that if he couldn't conquer this system using conventional tactics, he would simply destroy it and eliminate the troublesome tactical innovations that had disrupted his carefully planned assault. The sight of those enormous weapons charging their devastating energies made Emily's decision for her. She had spent weeks helping to maintain humanity's masquerade as a lost Helix colony, but watching an alien empire prepare to destroy Earth because of their deception felt like the ultimate betrayal of everything she had hoped First Contact might represent. "I'm initiating the Revelation Protocol," she announced, her fingers moving across the control panels with determined precision. Colonel Morgan looked up from his tactical displays in alarm. "Emily, we discussed this. If we reveal our true nature, Now, we lose any protection our alliance with the Helix provides. The Dominion will see us as an unknown threat factor. And if we don't, they're going to crack our planet because they think we're a Helix military installation? Emily replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. Look at those weapons charging. Drax isn't trying to conquer Terra 7 anymore. He's planning to eliminate it entirely. Her transmission cut across all communication frequencies simultaneously, broadcasting on Helix and Dominion channels with equal strength. The message was simple but revolutionary, a complete revelation of humanity's true identity and the story of how they had become involved in a galactic war by accident. The broadcast included Earth's real history, from their earliest conflicts to their gradual progress toward global cooperation. It showed their technological development, their cultural achievements, and their decision to risk everything defending strangers they had never met. Most importantly, it explained that they were not an advanced Helix colony, but an entirely separate species that had chosen to stand with the Helix against oppression. Admiral Tan's first response came within minutes, transmitted on a secure channel that bypassed the main fleet communications. Terra 7, or should I say, Earth. This revelation explains much about your tactical innovations. Your species developed military strategies independently of galactic civilization, which is why your approaches seemed so revolutionary to our commanders. War Prime Drax's reaction was more complex. The Dominion fleet held position while their command structure processed the implications of Emily's broadcast. For the first time in centuries, they faced a species with no prior contact with galactic civilization, yet possessing tactical capabilities that had successfully challenged Dominion military doctrine. The broadcast continued for hours, with Emily and her team providing a complete picture of human civilization. They shared their art, their music, their literature, and their philosophy. They explained their struggles with war and their progress toward peace. Most importantly, they offered both sides the same choice that humanity had once faced: evolution beyond conquest or continuation in an endless cycle of violence. The response from both fleets was immediate and dramatic. Within the Dominion forces, individual ship commanders began requesting clarification of their orders. The idea of destroying an entire species that had chosen to defend others, despite having no obligation to do so, created moral conflicts that Dominion military doctrine had never addressed. Captain Foster watched his tactical displays as Dominion formations began showing signs of internal dissent. Several enemy squadrons are powering down their weapons, he reported to Admiral Tan. It looks like some of their commanders are refusing to participate in a planetary bombardment. War Prime Drax found himself facing a situation that no amount of military training had prepared him for. His tactical officers reported that nearly 30% of his fleet was requesting confirmation of orders, while others were openly questioning the strategic necessity of destroying a world that had demonstrated such remarkable tactical innovation. The planet crackers remained charged and ready, but the crews operating them were no longer certain they wanted to use them. The broadcast from Earth had fundamentally changed the nature of the conflict from a military conquest to a moral choice. Admiral Tan made his decision first. The Helix fleet moved to defensive positions around Earth, but not as conquerors or protectors of a colony. They positioned themselves as allies, defending the home world of a species that had chosen to stand with them despite having every reason to remain neutral. People of Earth, Tan's broadcast reached every receiver on the planet. Your species has shown us something we had forgotten in our centuries of war. That choice matters more than capability, and courage matters more than technology. The Helix fleet stands with you not because you are one of us, but because you have chosen to be one with us. War Prime Drax faced the most difficult decision of his military career. His strategic objectives could still be achieved through planetary bombardment, but the moral cost had become impossible to ignore. The species defending this system had committed no crimes against the Dominion, possessed no resources worth claiming, and offered no strategic threat to Dominion territory. They had simply chosen to help others. The Dominion commander's final transmission surprised everyone, including his own officers. "This is War Prime Drax to all forces. The primary objective of this campaign was to eliminate Helix military capabilities threatening Dominion space. Intelligence analysis indicates that the defensive innovations we encountered originated from a previously unknown species with no hostile intentions toward Dominion territory." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic politics. "All Dominion forces are ordered to withdraw from this system. Further analysis of this situation will be conducted at the strategic level. Individual ship commanders who wish to remain and observe the establishment of diplomatic relations with this new species are authorized to do so on a voluntary basis." The withdrawal wasn't complete. Nearly a third of the Dominion fleet remained. In the outer system, their commanders choosing observation over retreat. But the planet crackers powered down, and the immediate threat to Earth passed. In the aftermath, Admiral Tan's flagship took position near Earth's moon as construction began on humanity's first interstellar diplomatic facility. The Helix offered to share their knowledge of galactic civilization, while humans contributed something equally valuable: proof that species could change, choose cooperation over conquest, and find strength in unlikely alliances. Dr. Emily Ross worked with Helix linguists to establish the first interspecies diplomatic protocols, while Colonel Morgan collaborated with alien military commanders to develop joint defensive strategies. The deception that had begun as a desperate survival tactic had evolved into something far more significant: the foundation of a new approach to galactic relations based on choice rather than conquest. Long-range sensors continued monitoring for signs of the Greater Dominion's response to these unprecedented events, but for the first time since intercepting that initial alien transmission, humanity faced the future with allies rather than facing it alone. Their greatest adventure in the galaxy had begun not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with the simple decision to stand with others against oppression,